Hey everyone and welcome back. In today's video we will be discussing about the Splunk configuration directories. Now in a typical Splunk instance there are multiple versions of a configuration files which will be spreaded across the file system within this Splunk structure. Now we can have configuration files with same names in default, local and app directories. Now, these type of structure is basically also referred as the layering structure, and it helps Splunk determine the priorities. So let's understand this with a simple example. Now, let's assume that this first block, this first block column is called as default. Now, the second block is called as app and the third block is called as local. So these are three directories. Now, within the default directory, you have a stanza which says server name is equal to default. Now, you have the same stanza in the app directory where it says server name is equal to app. And again, you have the same stanza in the local directory where you have server name is equal to king. So this is called as the layering effect. So you can have same file names across default directory, across app directory, across local directory, and these file names can also have the same field names with a different value over here. So here the field name is server name and the value is default, app and king. Now for such use cases, how Splunk will take this up is depending upon the file precedence. So within Splunk, the system local has the highest file precedence, followed by app, followed by default. So how it works would be, now that we have server name is equal to default in default directory and server name is equal to king in the system local directory, then system local directories server name will be taken up by Splunk, even though the app and default directory has its own different version of the server name. We'll be discussing more about this. Now, any default configuration files within Splunk should never be edited. One golden rule to remember. So this is a nice quote. I got it from Splunk itself, that all these worlds are yours except the default. Attempt no editing there. So any configuration file that you see within the default directory, you should not touch that part. The reason why you should not touch is because whenever you do a Splunk upgrade, all the configurations within the default directory, they will be changed. So if you make any change to the default configuration, they will be overwritten during the upgrade process and your Splunk installation might stop working. So let's understand this with an example. So if I go to cd opt Splunk and within this I go to etc system. Now if I do lsl over here, let me go to etc system, and if I do a lsl, you will see that there are two directories over here. One is default and second is local. Now within default, if I do a lsl default, there are a lot of configuration files over here. Now do note that one configuration file is called as server.conf. Now if you do a lsl hyphen local, you will see that server.conf is also present within the local directory. So what you have is, you have one server.conf. Let's understand this again. So you have one server.conf within the default directory and you have one server.conf within the local directory. Now this is what we were seeing as the layering effect, where essentially what we have is, we have the same configuration file in two places. In one place is the default directory and second place is the local directory. Now whatever configurations within the configuration file, so let's assume that within one configuration file you have server name is equal to default and here you have server name is equal to king. So within this, the Splunk will pick up server name is equal to king. It will not pick up server name is equal to default. Very important part to remember. So let's look into how that would look like. So what I'll do a vim into default server.conf. Okay, vim is not there. Let's do a vi. So within this, if you look into the general section, here you have server name is equal to host name. So this is one configuration file, and along with this there are various other configuration files which are present, or I would say key value pairs here. Now if you go within the local directory, again if I do a server.conf, you will see that here you again have the same section called as general, and you have the server name, and here you have the hard coded value. So essentially what is happening is you have two same files, one in local, second in default directory, and in default directory you have hard coded this specific value. So whatever value that is hard coded within the local directory, which is system local, that would have the highest precedence overall. So this is like a king. Any value within the app as well as default will not be taken into consideration if the value is explicitly defined within the local directory. This is one important part to remember. So one thing that I wanted to also share is that many times here you see the location is Splunk home etc system default. So this Splunk home is something that you will see typically in the Splunk documentation. So basically you can install Splunk in OPT, you can even install Splunk in a different directory structure altogether. So this is the reason why this is considered as variable. So by default this would be OPT Splunk. However, if you install in a different directory, then this specific variable will change. So just important part to remember. Now, speaking about local configuration file, we have already discussed that whenever you make changes to the default configuration file, it would typically get overwritten within the upgrade process, and it is not recommended to put anything in default. And this is the reason why it is recommended that whatever files that you create, whatever files that you edit, it should be done under the local configuration. So the local is typically Splunk home etc system local. So this is where you would typically make Splunk global configuration changes. So with this theoretical session, let's look into the practicality aspect and look into how exactly it would work. So the first thing that I'll do is I'll quickly run an apt-get update with the sudo command. So basically the reason why I wanted to do is because I wanted to install Nano. So Nano is a great editor available in Linux system. So generally I prefer always Nano over VI. So that's just a personal choice. Anyways, now that we have Nano editor up and running, let's look into the configuration file precedence. So let's go to the default directory, and within default you have lot of files. We'll be looking into web.conf over here. So if I open web.conf, you will see that there is a default. Within default there is settings, and if you go a bit down here, you have HTTP port is equal to 8000. Now if you remember, whenever we open Splunk in GUI via browser, we have to manually specify port 8000, and that configuration file basically that setting comes from the web.conf. Now what I'll do is, let's assume that I want to change this HTTP port from 8000 to 8080. Now as we already know, we should never touch the default.conf file. Very important part to remember. So what we'll do is we'll copy this specific configuration, and I'll go to local. Let me go back. I'll go to local and I'll create a file with the same name, which is web.conf. It should be the same name, and we'll copy the configuration here. Now instead of port 8000, what I'll do is I'll say 8080 and I'll save this. Now once I have saved this, we'll need to restart Splunk. So I'll say opt Splunk bin Splunk restart. And now here, if you'll see within the checking prerequisites, you'll see that it is actually looking for port 8080 whether it is open or not, and then it is trying to start the web server on port 8080 as opposed to port 8000, which is present within the default configuration files. And once that is done, you will see that the Splunk web interface is up. This is the hostname :8080. So although we had files with same name with different parameters in default and local, Splunk took up the configuration file within the system local, and it has used that as the primary changes. Now important part to remember is that whatever you define within this directory system local, this has the highest precedence. Nothing can override this. So this is like a king. Whatever you put within this specific file, it will be taken into effect irrespective of what you define elsewhere. So this is one important part that we should be remembering. So this is it about the high level overview related to Splunk and its configuration file precedence. I hope this video has been useful for you. And if you have any doubts, questions, suggestions, feel free to connect us as Twitter, Facebook or LinkedIn, or mail us at instructors@kplabs.in. Thanks for watching.